Hello, and welcome to the latest installment of my Substack Live slash podcast. Um, for those who don't know, my name is Wendy Gordon, and it's Wendy with an I, Wendi. I see we have someone in the chat who is also Wendy with an I. Fabulous. Welcome. I'm usually not able to pay attention to the chat and talk at the same time, but that happened to catch my eye. My Substack is Changing Lives, and you can just access it at wendygordon.substack.com. And again, Wendy is Wendi. Um, I am very excited. This month's theme for my Substack is beginnings. And I have some beginnings I'm going to be sharing that I'm excited about, as does Jane. And so my guest today is Jane Duncan Rogers, and I'm going to let her introduce herself and her Substack.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Hi, everyone. Yes, my Substack is called Embracing Aging. And of course, that's what I'm writing about, aging and how best to embrace it, or how much we're not embracing it, or whatever. Mostly I'm writing for women because it's mostly women that are reading this kind of thing. Not only, but mostly. And basically, I'm hopefully helping people who are in later life. So later life is a kind of a elastic thing, but to age with confidence and courage and clarity, so that we can all have a more satisfying later stage of our lives. Let's put it that way.
Yes, I think that's wonderful. And um, I didn't mention that Changing Lives is specifically about mental and spiritual well-being. And so I do coaching that is often focused around times of transition, either people questioning their former spiritual beliefs or just dealing with family members and friends who have very conservative religious beliefs and aren't accepting of the individual for whatever reason. Um, or people making midlife career changes, which is something I have done. Um, and so I do frequently end up naturally working with women at midlife and beyond who are in the process of starting new careers, or who are considering it, or are ending or starting a new relationship, all kinds of major life transitions, that it just helps to have someone to talk to, not to tell you what to do, but to say, hey, I've been there, and this is the practice that kind of helped me stay grounded and get through that rough time and keep going.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so then the new beginning that I'm most excited about this year is I have created a paid membership for my subscribers, and we are going to have monthly Zoom gatherings. And the first one is this Sunday at 1 p.m. Central. And we are going to have a different theme each month that will correlate to the theme of my written post. So this month it's beginnings. And I just am so excited to create an interactive community where I can see faces, and we can have conversations like this one, but in a group setting on Zoom. And so that's my biggest new beginning that I'm excited about right now. And how about you, Jane? I know you have something new coming up this year.
Yeah, I do. I do. And I have a similar sort of thing. It's not starting until the beginning of February. It's a conscious aging circle. And that is for people who want to bring a considerable amount of consciousness to the fact that they are aging, but also to have conversations about aging and be able to talk with like-minded people, a small group of like-minded people, about the things that people don't usually want to talk about. So there's lots of those, actually, once we start going down underneath the sort of surface layer. I'm not quite as organized as you, I noticed, because it's not linked to a particular Substack that I'm writing, but maybe I'll be inspired by you, Wendy, and that will happen. I've still got a few weeks to go.
Well, it seems like a natural tie-in, since your Substack is embracing aging, that would be a conscious circle of women talking about that, as you said. And similarly for me, I have a separate group that I haven't decided on dates yet. In fact, maybe those who are interested in it can help me decide the best day and time for it. That will be a 6-week group starting in probably either April or May. That's called Spiritual Support for Weary Souls. And that group is more exclusive. It's limited to 12 people. And I ran it last year, and the participants loved it so much that at the end of the 6 weeks, they said, "Can we pay you more and keep meeting like once a month?" So we have been meeting ever since then and really formed this wonderful community of where it's safe to share anything. By the end of the 6 weeks, people told me they had shared things they hadn't even told their family members or closest friends, and it was a wonderfully diverse group. A pagan, a witch, an atheist, me, who kind of Christian adjacent but not Christian anymore, and so we talked about the spiritual places in our lives and experiences, and just the way in which everything is or can be spiritual. There's no distinction between, the material world and the spiritual world, and we're all spiritual beings, and it's so tied to our mental health too. So that's my other big new beginning this year. But I also want to talk a little bit about beginnings that we've made before now in our lives, and those times of major transitions.
Mm.
And so I'll let you start with that. I know you had at least one major transition when we talked earlier. So you want to share about that?
Yeah. Yeah, and there's been a few in my life, but the biggest one really was when my first husband died. So this was back in 2011. I was about 54 at the time, I think 54, 55, and he'd been diagnosed with cancer, stomach cancer, and initially it seemed that with treatment everything looked good. That you know, assuming that the operation that he had to have was going to get everything out, he had a good prognosis. So, of course, we assumed that that's what would happen, because you do, obviously. But it didn't work. He did have chemo, he did have the operation. They didn't manage to get absolutely everything out. And that put a completely different spin on things. So, as it turned out, we had about maybe 8 months from that point onwards before he actually died. Of course, when somebody's in the process of dealing with a life-threatening illness, you don't know when it's going to happen. It's only afterwards you look back and you can say it was 8 months, until he
Yes.
died. At the time, it was like, well, at the time, actually, we were forced, I think, and it was okay, forced to live in the present moment, as everybody talks about, all the sages talk about. Well, my God, this is a bit of a radical way to do that. I wouldn't recommend it.
Yes.
Getting a serious illness like that, to make you live in the present moment. But that was one of the benefits of it, if I can say that word benefit in conjunction with that word cancer. But absolutely, it was. But he did eventually die. And of course, that changed my life completely. And at the time, I was working as a coach. I was a small business coach, helping people in the holistic field to get their businesses out there better. In fact, to think about it as a business at all, really. And I carried on doing that eventually, although, well, those of you listening who have had a bereavement of somebody very close to you will know that, my God, it really impacts you in all sorts of ways. And I couldn't work. I couldn't work for quite a few weeks, actually. But anyway, the end result from a practical point of view of this was that when was it? About 2 years later, I had started writing. No, it wasn't 2 years later. I'm getting my dates muddled up here. I published a memoir, Gifted by Grief. By this time, I felt that I had been gifted by my grief. Looking back, I probably wouldn't choose that as a title again, because if I couldn't recommend it to people who were newly bereaved, because it was, they don't feel gifted, and neither
Right.
did I, you know. But anyway, by this stage, I had felt gifted by it, and that it's a very personal memoir. And in it, I wrote about uh, the questions that I'd asked my husband before he died, and these are really practical things. They had, in fact, been sent to me as a long list by a friend who'd had to send the same email 3 times before I would look at it, because these were questions like, what are your passwords? What kind of coffin do you want? How do you want your body dressed? Really practical, but in your face things. And eventually we did sit down and we did have this discussion, and actually it was really good. Oh my God, it was surprisingly loving and close and intimate, I mean, quite something. Anyway, I wrote about that in this book, and that's what people responded to. Now, I had the gifts that I had received had all been spiritual, nearly all of them. And that's what I was writing about. That's what I thought people might be interested in. But no, they wanted to know about these questions. And lots of people said to me, I need to answer these questions too. And so eventually I started up a not-for-profit, which was all about end-of-life planning. And that was major because I was going from being a solo coach, and I'd always been self-employed, for the previous, 25 years or something. And suddenly I was doing this proper thing that had a board and members of the board that I had to work with. That was a big learning curve, I can tell you.
I can imagine.
Yeah. But, I was really clear, and I had my husband, Philip, in spirit behind me. It felt like I was doing our work together out in the world. He'd been a psychotherapist and was very, very passionate about helping to transform other people's lives if he could do that. And here he was still doing it from the grave, so to speak, through me. And that felt very, very important. So although it was absolutely not planned, any of this, that's what I ended up doing for 8 years, I think it was. Yeah.
That's so interesting because I had somewhat of a similar journey. Thankfully, my spouse of many years is still with me, and we're happy together. But my kind of devastating life experience was that my former career and my husband's former career, we actually worked together at the time in a church. We were both ministers, pastors, and in 2020, things in the U.S. politically, of course, were becoming more and more divisive, and there was the family separation policy at the border where children were being taken from their parents, and my husband and I were appalled by that, and on top of that, it was the height of the COVID pandemic where businesses and churches, most of us anyway, briefly shut down. There was no vaccine yet or anything, and it was just too dangerous. Anyway, long story short, that created a lot of conflict with our church council, who were big Trump supporters and thought COVID was no big deal because that's what he was saying. And also, we're fine with the family separation policy and anything Trump said or did. And so that led to the unexpected end of both of our careers as pastors. We both interviewed with other churches, but the same issues kept coming up. We are LGBTQ affirming, and the churches were not. We are just kind of, Jesus taught love for everyone. That's what he modeled. That's what we're called to do. And others were, going all in on this, this group of people is bad kind of thing. So when my career and my husband's both ended suddenly, and we were both unemployed, and the height of COVID, and had to move out of all of the things, I spiraled into a very deep depression. And I spent more than a year seriously considering suicide. That's how bad it was. Um, but I would now say I was gifted by that depression because that made me desperate enough to have the courage to say, I don't want that life anymore. I don't believe a lot of the things that Christianity teaches anymore. My spirituality is just too broad for that. And also, I'm not willing to stay silent when I think something is wrong. I want to write about this. I want to speak about this. I want to do what I can to change what's happening, or at least acknowledge it and that it's wrong. And so that led me to start writing, and to that my writing led to doing lives like this, and making a podcast, and to doing coaching with other people who are going through major transitions. And you mentioned the transition from being self-employed to, having this board. For me, it was the transition from being a full-time employee to suddenly, this is my business, and I don't know anything about marketing. I don't know about the, administrative side of things so much. And so it's been a great learning curve for me, but also incredibly rewarding to coach other people through, mental health, especially depression and anxiety issues. Not that I in any way am a professional therapist or medical provider, I make that clear, but just as a peer who has been through something similar and figured out some ways to kind of deal with the anxiety and the sadness and come out of it and into a new life and be clearer on who I am and what I want and how I want to live, is incredibly rewarding as it was for you. Uh,
Yeah, it's funny that though, isn't it? It's like, that sounds like a really, what a shocking time for you because, when something like that happens, it's like all your values come into question, don't they? I mean,
yes.
perhaps everything that you had grown up thinking, and it's like when you're faced with that, it's like, well, I guess you have to either choose yourself or something else entirely. I can
Yes.
completely see why you would be feeling suicidal. And actually, I want to say something about that because I wouldn't say that I was feeling suicidal after my husband died, but I absolutely did not want to live. I knew that I did not want to be alive. I couldn't say that I wanted to kill myself, but I couldn't see any point at all in being alive. We didn't have children together. He had children from a previous marriage. And so, in a way, my worst fear had happened, which was I'll be left alone in the world if he dies before me, which he did. And it was not an easy time. It really wasn't. I can remember Googling, how long does grief last? You know? And, of course, there's no answer to that because it's
Right.
different for everybody. But yeah, was and also that was another thing. I've been in the self-help community for years and years and years since my early 20s. But the last thing I wanted was a self-help book. I just didn't want them anymore. But that also meant that something that I had always used as a support had to go out the window as well. So it was like I was, I felt quite lost for quite a long time. Um, so yeah, I want to, because, you're talking now about the gifts of depression. I'm talking about the gifts of grief, but actually when you're in the middle of it, it doesn't feel like that at all, does it?
Exactly. It's the worst experience of your life. And for me too, um, being a pastor, I was used to ministering to other people in crisis situations. And I had had some families who had had a death by suicide in their family or a child's death or so, crises of all kinds where I was the support person for them. Um, and I also had had previous bouts of depression in my life, but none this severe or long lasting.
Mm.
But like you said, when you're in the midst of it, all the stuff I already knew from previously battling depression that would make me feel better, I was just not interested in. What's the point of even trying to get help or medication or journal or go outside, because ultimately my life will never get better. It's this unending horror show. Why should I even try? There's no hope.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so what I'm just thinking, what was it that helped me? So there were two things that helped me. One was the phrase, this too shall pass. You know, that had been at the end of my husband's hospital bed. He had died in hospital. He was in a separate room. Do you know, when I look back at that, I think we were just grateful that he was in a separate room and not on a ward with, three other people. And now I know now, I didn't know it then, that he was put in a separate room because they knew he was dying. Nobody mentioned that to us. Nobody mentioned it. I mean, for goodness sake, in a hospital. Anyway, never mind. We were glad about the separate room and we had this up. And of course, looking back on it now, I think this too shall pass. Yeah, well, it doesn't actually mean that you're going to get better. I knew he wasn't going to get better. He probably knew it as well. But even a couple of days beforehand, he had said to me he didn't want to die because he still had stuff that he wanted to give the world. And, I knew the end was near by that point. But in a funny way, of course, he did still carry on giving to the
Yes.
world through me. So that was lovely. Um, but there was another thing, which was, let me see if I can remember it now. Yes, it was a phrase, I cannot know that this is not the next step in my liberation. To say that again, I cannot know that this is not the next step in my liberation. And that would would pull me back from wherever I thought I was going, which was a horrible, and a place where I felt terrible. it would pull me back because I didn't know it was true. I didn't know that actually on the other side of this horribleness, there might be something better, you know? I mean, I wasn't prepared to think that because at the time I thought, you know, I'd been very much in love with my husband. We'd had a good marriage and he wasn't there. So how could it possibly be good anymore, you know? But actually, I'm living to tell the tale because I am married again now.
Ah,
I've been married for 5 years now to a man who had also lost his wife. In fact, in our first couple of dates, we did nothing but talk about death, which is definitely unusual. But
yes.
we're really happy, and both me and Ian now we say we're very grateful for both of our previous spouses, and because without their life and death, we would not be together now. So it's like it- it's not. It's like it isn't good and bad. It's not as clear as that.
Right.
Very hard though to get that.
Yes, very hard to get there. That's the thing. And so many people don't get there, and either become as depressed as I did, or become very bitter, angry people, and turn away from everything that used to give their life meaning. Um, and it is just challenging to go through. But as you said, it can be a portal, a transformative time, ultimately looking back. But at the time, and some of the worst things that people said to me when I was in that depressed state was, everything happens for a reason, and one day you'll look back on this and see, why you needed to go through it, kind of a thing. And that's not at all helpful when you're in the midst of it. You're not capable of believing that, and it's just like basically telling you to suck it up and get over it when you need to process the emotions.
Yeah, exactly. So, what did you find that was helpful? What did people say that you found was helpful?
Um, Mostly it was not saying anything at all. It was people who were just willing to listen to me and to, give me a hug and not, give these promises that seemed utterly false to me, that the assurances that things were going to get better. Um, And it was also people who had been through and survived their own depression that I could talk with honestly, and they could say, "Yeah, I've been there, and I know it seems hopeless now, but I made it through, and I think you will too," kind of a thing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and
I had
I
that as well.
also later, I one of the posts that I wrote on Substack, but it's been quite a while ago now, 'cause I have over 200 posts. I started in 2022. I'm writing weekly. But anyway, it was titled something like, um, "Are Mental Breakdowns Necessary for Breakthroughs?" And there's a quote in it that's too long for me to quote correctly now, but it was talking about how mental breakdowns are the self's quest for healing, and that actually your life is already broken, and that's why you have the breakdown, and the breakdown is necessary to rebuild on a healthier foundation, and to discover who you really are and allow that self to emerge, kind of a thing. And again, I think that's absolutely true. At the time, I was absolutely convinced there was zero chance of my life ever being worth living, and now I'm so glad that I'm that previous life is over, and I have this new freedom to say what I really think and to publicly advocate for alternatives to things that are happening that I don't think are right.
Yeah, yeah, no, I understand that. And actually, that I was just writing down mental breakdowns to mental breakthroughs. I must go and read that post because that's a lovely phrase. It's not one that many people necessarily would like because they we all want the mental breakthroughs. We don't want the
Right.
bit before.
We want to get to the good part and skip the
That's
whole bad
right.
part.
I know. But something there reminded me of a promise that I made to myself after my husband had died because some events happened, one of which allowed me to understand that, or to admit to myself that I had not been able to fully open my heart. There's a whole series of reasons for this in our marriage. Now, that didn't mean it was a bad marriage. We were still had a really good time and everything, but I knew there was something that I was holding back, and I didn't feel I wasn't able at the time to access it. He knew that too, so it was a source. It was a bit of a challenge sometimes for us. But anyway, after he died, I promised myself that if I ever got the chance to be with anybody again, then I would keep my heart open. Now, at the time, the thought of anybody else was just ridiculous, no interest at all. I certainly couldn't imagine anybody who could possibly be as good as my husband was. But the only problem with that was that I couldn't also imagine being on my own for another 30 years, say, if I'd lived, to 80 or 90. And so, yeah, that was a bit of a problem. But it meant that when I did meet the man who is now my husband, Ian, I was challenged because, of course, I'd made this promise to myself. And there were quite a few times, particularly in the first couple of years, where I could feel my heart closing for whatever reason. We were having a discussion, or, he'd done something I didn't like, or whatever
Right.
it was, the usual little tiny thing that can become a very big thing if you don't address it. And I had to take myself off and give myself what I call a talking to. Usually I went off for a walk in the woods, give myself a talking to, do whatever practices that felt right for me at the time, one of which was simply being in the woods on my own, so, until I could feel my heart softening and opening up again. I really had to do that. That was a practice. I don't have to do that now, hardly ever. But then it happened regularly. But because I'd promised to myself to do this, and also that was a promise to my previous husband as well, then I had to do it. So I didn't have an option in that sense. But I'm so glad that I did that because, now everything that I've learned in my previous marriage and in my life up till now, I can put into the situation where I am now with Ian, and it's great. We have a good time.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And I'll be talking about this more in February when the theme of my newsletter is love, and my guest will talk about that. But my husband and I, as I said, we've been married since 1991, and we're still happily together. Um, but we both come from homes where our parents were unhappily married for years and ultimately divorced. His when he was a senior in high school, and mine after I had already left home. Um,
Mhm.
and so neither of us had, that modeling of what healthy communication is like in a relationship, or being affectionate around each other and just enjoying each other's company, basically. Um, and so we had to have those hard conversations and find ways, when we disagreed, to um, work it through
Yeah.
without, breaking up or just like being angry and not speaking to each other, or any of the unhealthy things that our parents did in their relationships. Um, so yeah, absolutely. There's a learning curve throughout life.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's
And
right.
uh, and the other thing that I did when this wasn't, when my most recent depression, but another hard time in my life, I wrote a book called Timeless Truths for Troubled Times, and it's still available on Amazon. But it was written in 2011, and I'm rereading it now because we're actually discussing it in a group that I'm in, and it's amazing how relevant it still is, even though it was written that long ago, and how much it speaks to the current situation, politically and globally, and the need to find hope and to do things to help other people, and to give ourselves grace, learn to love ourselves, embrace our spirituality and that connection to whatever we conceive of, the divine or the higher power, wisdom, universe, etc. um, but yeah, so I guess being proactive is always a kind of the key to getting out of those mental states for me too. And I do it by journaling, the
Mhm.
talking to that you mentioned earlier. I journal every morning, and that's one way that I talk to myself. And sometimes it's the divine talks to me through it. And time in nature. For me, I still, every chance I get when the weather cooperates, there's a local park that I walk in, and it has great blue herons. I usually see at least one every time I'm walking. It has a lake, bunny rabbits, gorgeous sunsets,
Yeah.
all of the things. And even from the moment I step out of the car, I'm kind of instantly calmer. And I can just take these meditative walks. And, no matter what was going on before I left the house, how anxious or upset I was, I come back completely different and relaxed.
Yeah. Yeah, I really recognize that. And actually, I mean, I started going for early morning walks. I'm an early morning person. So I wake up early and usually I just want to get out of bed and be outside. Even now, it's a bit more difficult when it's dark, when it's dark until at least 8:30 in the morning here in Scotland, but at the moment. But I still want to get up and get out. I don't always go in the woods when it's dark, but there's something, I didn't start doing these early morning walks until I was maybe in my late 40s. And I started because I was trying to lose a bit of weight. And after about 3 weeks of going out regularly, I realized, oh my God, I love this. I just loved it. I was living in the middle of Belfast at the time, where I had been brought up. And I was walking along the river and through the woods and everything. Even that was in the middle of the city. And gosh, I've never stopped since. Most mornings now I'm out for anything between half an hour and an hour, and because I love it, you know.
Yes.
And now this is another thing, and I hear you saying this as well, because this is a sort of it's a consistent practice, if you like. But I have never thought of it as a consistent practice. I've just thought of it as me doing something that I love that makes me feel good. And um, but actually, the effects of that over time have meant that the calmness or the insight or the inspiration or the connection with God or whatever you want to call it is is just there almost sometimes when I just walk out the front door,
Yes, exactly.
which is just lovely because then I can really relax and be in that feeling. And yeah, so I'm all in favor of people finding whatever it is. It doesn't have to be going out in nature, whatever it is that makes you feel good, and then do it a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah. And writing was therapeutic for me too, and still is to an extent, but especially as I was emerging from the depression, and I was
Mm.
writing these personal essays about my experience of depression and my inner struggles with self-love and managing anxiety and all of those things. And so it was therapeutic for me to publish them online for two reasons. Number one, it reduced my shame. In the past, I never would have talked about all of that with anyone. It was a shameful secret that I had been in that mental state and that I had been so depressed that I had had suicidal thoughts, etc. And by publishing it online for the whole world to see, there was no shame anymore. And then more importantly, the second thing that happened is I started getting comments from readers saying, "Thank you so much for your honesty about this and your openness. And I've had a similar experience, and I always, felt bad about myself for not being stronger or, whatever." And so that's really how my Substack has grown, is just people saying, "Me too." And I'm so glad that you're being open about this instead of just writing about how great your life is and your latest vacation and, how wonderful everything is, and ignoring the realities, right?
Yeah, no, I understand that. And this is why we've connected, I'm sure, Wendy, because I get the same thing. People saying, "Oh, you're so honest." And I'm like, "Really? This is just me being me."
Exactly.
So, yeah, really, really. I use journaling a lot as well. I've always journaled actually since I was a teenager. And I would, I wasn't writing for publication at that point. When Philip died, but I had been writing a blog. So that is for publication. I never thought about it like that. I had been writing a blog every week. And of course, I was working on my own. And when something big like, your partner dying um, happens, then you have to write about that as well because it affects the business. It did affect my work. So I was already being very open and honest then, and that has continued through into my writing now, obviously. But I was thinking, I had uh, another. It's gone in one ear and out the other. Okay, I was going to say something and I forgot what it is. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Um, as you were talking, I was thinking about the coaching clients that I work with too. Many of them find me through my writing, and they're drawn to me because, like, even on my coaching page, I make it very clear, if you're looking for someone to give you a 10-step plan to fix your life or to make you rich or thin or whatever you want to be, I am definitely not the coach for you. because I will tell you up front, my life is not perfect now, and yours isn't going to be if you work with me. I will help you figure out your next steps because I believe we all have the answers within us that we're seeking. And that the key is to learn to find and trust our own answers and follow our own inner compass, not someone else's roadmap or the directions they're trying to give us about what we should do or believe. Um, and
I
that's
know,
just
but
so important to acknowledge that reality that we're all unique individuals. And
yeah,
what's incredibly helpful to me may do nothing for you. And that's
yeah,
totally okay. It doesn't mean that you're defective somehow or that I'm superior. It's just we each have to find our own path. And sometimes we need help to see that there even is a path or that we're capable of creating a path.
yeah, no, I agree about that. I tell you what, though, Wendy, I have spent years feeling terribly irritated with people who would say to me, the answers are within you, or you know everything already. It's like because I wasn't finding them. I was attached to the idea of somebody else knowing the answer, and all I had to do was follow what they told me. And actually, I spent quite a lot of time doing that with all sorts of different people. And of course, I learned a lot. But if I look back now, I think I learned one of the things that I learned was that I need to trust myself more and more and more.
Yes, and
I
absolutely. I
learned it.
was the same way. I was always looking for the magic pill medication or the right therapist or the right daily practice that was going to heal my life in every way and make me feel good about myself every day and always be this enlightened person who would have the answers. And yes, as you said, it's understandable to not trust ourselves when we're going through something hard and we don't know what to do.
Mhm.
But yet the key ultimately to the making the transformation successfully is coming to realize that, yeah, actually, I do know what I want and I'm not sure I'm capable of it, but I might be and I want to try.
Yeah, it was really interesting. And that thing about I do know what I want, that was a big deal for me because, I grew up with one of the messages that I grew up with was, I want doesn't get, I mean, it was usually said by my parents in relationship to us. I'm one of four asking for food, you know. I want doesn't get. You're supposed to say please and all that sort of stuff. But I definitely took that on board in probably other ways as well. To the extent that for quite a long time I didn't dare allow myself to know what I wanted. And that is not helpful. That is not helpful. So it's not like that anymore, thank goodness. But that's because I've done the journaling, done the inner
Yeah.
work, explored and been willing to go through the difficult times or have the difficult feelings and not try and push them away. Because that's another thing that I learned. Well, I thought I'd learnt it before Philip died, but there I was, I held on to the one thing, particularly in the first few months after he died, that I knew I'm just seeing that sorry about this. I need to plug in my battery. I'm sorry.
uh,
Hold on a
I've
minute.
had that happen too. I totally understand.
Good. That should not have happened. Sorry, folks. um, what was I saying about, oh, now I can't remember again.
How you had thought that before Philip died, you were already, in touch with what you wanted and able to share your emotions, but then you realized that
Yes, yes. I had trained with Louise Hay back in 1990. So, and I was the first person to bring her work to the UK and Europe. And I knew that, I mean, she, unbelievably wise woman. But anyway, one of the things that I remember that she had said at that time was, what you feel, you can heal. And so I knew I needed to allow myself to feel whatever feeling I was feeling. And whenever it came up, I was not going to suppress it or anything, which led to quite a few interesting times. But anyway, I held on to that idea like it was my savior in this time, this really turbulent time. And and although I thought that I had known this beforehand, here I was being given an opportunity to really practice it because, you know, why don't we want to feel our feelings? Because they feel really uncomfortable.
yes,
So afterwards, I wrote about this as what I call now front door, back door thinking, which is basically when emotions come knocking at your door, the and we don't like them. What we try and do is shut the front door, bolt it, pull the curtains across, pull down the shutters, pretend it's not there. It doesn't work, by the way, because it always gets in somehow.
Yes.
What we really need to do is open the windows, open the door. And then I thought about it, and then I realized I need to open the back door of the house as well, so that the emotion can come in, can be there for however long it's to be there for, and then it can easily go as well.
Yeah.
And that was like, oh, right, okay, yes. Now, I didn't know that I was doing that at the time. It was only after when I was writing Gifted by Grief, and I was going back through my journals, which was, my God, that was painful. Actually, but anyway, I'll come back to that. That's when I realized, that this is what I was doing, and this was how I then thought about it and had that image. The journal stuff that was really helpful, actually. And the one thing about journals is that you write stuff down. And normally I don't go back very much and look at things. But because I was writing this book, I had to go back and have a look. And that's how I knew that I was coming through this, because the pain that I had written and expressed, and sometimes not written at all, just lots of dramatic shapes and colors, was not like what I was feeling now. And this was maybe a year or 18 months. I don't know how long it was afterwards. And that was very helpful for me to know. It was like I could compare how I was feeling now compared to how I was feeling then, even though I was still feeling rubbish now, I thought, So, yeah, I think journals are wonderful.
Yes. And I actually, another post that I wrote where it was about the one comparison that is helpful, which is comparing where we are now to where we were and acknowledging that progress, that it's so hard to see because, I tend to beat myself up for like, I know what I should do, but I didn't do it. Or I start out the day with this list of things I'm going to accomplish and get derailed. Something takes longer than I thought it would, or whatever. There's a distraction of some sort. And so, yes, looking back is very helpful to remind myself I may not be exactly where I want to be or where I thought I would be at this stage of my life. But when I compare where I am now to where I was when I thought there was no hope, my life was over, I wanted to die, that's a pretty dramatic improvement. Uh,
Exactly. But actually, just as we're talking about journals, because this is another thing that came up in the end of life planning work that I was doing. It's like, if you don't want your journals to be seen by somebody after you've died, you have to think about that beforehand.
yes, that's an excellent point. My husband actually asked me recently, because I have tons of journals since I write every day. If something happens to you when you die, what do you want me to do with these journals, and do you want me to read them? And my answer was, actually, I'm fine with you reading them. There are some parts of it that might hurt you when the days that I was mad at you or whatever, but I'm fine with you reading them. And honestly, because I am so open online about my life anyway, even if my journals were published, I wouldn't care. Of course, I'm dead. I wouldn't care about anything, right? But I know for some people it is very important to say, no, I don't want this shared. Maybe they've written about their family and they don't want to hurt people who are still living, or maybe it's just too personal and they want, their secrets to die with them or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so many aspects of planning, and of course, most people don't plan at all for death because we don't know when it's going to happen, and it can be quite sudden and unexpected at any age. Um, so yeah, I actually,
Yeah.
when I was a pastor, I dealt with that too. I would have some people who would plan their own funeral and give me copies of the plan because I would be the one leading the funeral. Um, or they would know they were dying, and so have those kinds of conversations. And sometimes I was present to help facilitate them,
Mhm.
or help families make decisions about whether to turn off life support. That's
Mhm.
another important thing that often doesn't get talked about beforehand. If you're
Yeah.
only being kept alive with machines, is that what you want? Or do you want a
Yeah.
feeding tube inserted if it's going to have to be a permanent thing? Those sorts of decisions
Yeah.
uh, that are so hard for the family to make in the moment. There's so much emotion, but if you've talked about it ahead of time, and especially have a written document saying, these are my wishes,
Yeah. Oh my God, you and me, we are on the same page. I mean, this is what all my end of life planning stuff was about. It was just basically encouraging people to have the conversations that you don't want to be having when you're actually in the process of dying and you might not be able to have anyway.
Yeah.
You need to have them beforehand. It's really that simple. And yet, as a society, we are not good at doing that. Even after COVID or through
Yes.
COVID,
Hmm.
not good at it. And we need to get better. We absolutely need to get better. So everybody in my family knows about this. Whether or not they've actually taken care of it, that's another matter. Because
Right.
that's another thing that I've learned is, that phrase, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Well, I'm very, very good at taking people to the water. And sometimes I will dunk their heads in it, but I can't actually make them drink it.
Right.
So, but that's up to education, you and me inspiring other people and hopefully understanding that actually, you may know this is a good idea, that you have to talk about it, but knowing it's a good idea to do it is very different from actually doing it. So, and
Yeah.
also, I always say it's always better to get things written down. Oh my goodness. I think,
Yeah.
people don't understand that when people are grieving, because of the effective grief, it changes how you think, it changes how you feel, it changes how you behave. It changes your memory, things that people might have,
Yes.
one person in the family remembers one thing about somebody who had died, the other person remembers something completely different about what they said. That's not helpful.
Yep.
That causes, let's say, difficult conversations, if not worse.
Yes.
So to have that be avoided is really important, I think, if you care about, your loved ones, really. I know you're not going to be there. That's what most people say. Well, I'll be dead and it won't matter. Well, it won't matter to you. That's true. This is a very altruistic thing to do,
Yes.
but it also brings a great deal of relief right now while you're alive.
Yes. And similarly, understanding that it's not about you because yes, you'll be dead and not care, but it's about the people, your loved ones that you're leaving behind. I've had people say, I definitely don't want a funeral, memorial service, celebration of life, any kind of service of to when I die. I don't, and I definitely like if they're not being cremated, if they're going to be in a coffin, I don't want a viewing.
Mm.
Um, and but not having any kind of acknowledgement at all of the death, I say to them, well, obviously, you have the right to make that choice, but I just encourage you to think about, let picture someone that you love dying. Would you want there to be no acknowledgement of that death, no opportunity to gather with other loved ones and share happy memories? Just no help acknowledging reality and processing it and letting those emotions out in a setting where you're expected to cry and it's okay to acknowledge the grief.
Yeah, and actually, I have a personal story about that because my uncle, this is a few years ago now, I was his executor and we had talked about all sorts of things. He was very well prepared and all that. And then he did die suddenly. And one of the things he'd always said was that he didn't want to have a funeral. And I had not been able to make him change his mind about that. So I was put in the difficult position of, he hadn't got any family left. He didn't have any children or anything, but he did have some friends. And they all wanted to know when the funeral was, and there wasn't going to be a funeral. They were devastated, absolutely devastated. And I felt awful. I didn't know what to do, because obviously I could organize a funeral, but then I would be going against his wishes. And even though he was dead, that felt a terrible thing to do.
Yes.
Like I would be betraying him in some kind of way. And so it ended up with me saying, no, I'm sorry, there's just not going to be a funeral. That's not what he wanted. And it was really only that experience that made me realize that people need to think about this beforehand and make a very conscious decision. It doesn't have to be a funeral. It could just be a meeting of people in the local pub or whatever it is
Yes.
to mark the occasion of this person leaving this earth, you know? But something that somebody organizes, I think, is a good idea.
Yes, absolutely.
So, yeah, here we are. We've got on to death again. We nearly always do that when I'm around.
But it's also acknowledging death as a new beginning, as you shared it was for you at the time where we're grieving a death. And even though my death was the death of my career and not a person, that there it's a similar
Yeah, yeah,
grief,
yeah,
similar, people, death of a pet, or even say a child as an adult moving far away, and you
yeah,
almost never see them, or your relationship is strained and you're not speaking, or only at a superficial level when you used to be really close. There are
yeah.
all kinds of deaths in our life. Um, and at the same time, those deaths, those endings can be what makes the new beginnings possible that wouldn't have happened any other way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think and that brings us to the juxtaposition of life and death, beginnings and endings. You can't have one without the other. It's that simple. It really
Yes.
is, you know. I love that. I love that. I know not everybody does, but it appeals to the mischievous side in my nature, you know.
Yeah, so, I mean, and the other thing you and I have both learned is that it's never too late for a new beginning. So many people think, "Well, I'm too old now. I wish I had gone to college when I was younger. I wish I had chosen this other career. I wanted to write a book, but, I'm whatever age now." One of my other guests actually, published her 16th book, I think, when she at the age of 80 last year. Um, and it was about intergenerational friendships, and she has some friends who are 100 years old plus that are still enjoying their lives, and they're still mentally competent. And one of them, was taking walks that this my 80-year-old that I interviewed, Melinda Blau, by the way. The book is The Wisdom
Oh yes,
Whisperers. It's
I
wonderful.
know her. She's
Okay.
great.
Yes. Um, but anyway, yeah, just another wonderful example that, no, your life is not over just because you reach a certain age. And even if you do have some limitations, there are still new things that you're able to do, even if
Yeah.
it's simple as, writing a poem only for yourself, or having a friend come over for a visit, whatever.
Yeah, really important. And actually, one of the new things that I started this year, which really has surprised me, is I've been going to a gym. I mean, I can hardly believe that I can say that because all my life I've been like, oh my God, gyms, I've been really scathing about them. And I hadn't been, but I didn't like what I thought they were about. But I did understand, and particularly from some of the writers on Substack here, about how important it was when you're older. I'm 68 now, it's like to build up your strength. And even though I do lots of different exercise in all sorts of different forms, I wasn't particularly building my muscles. And anyway, so I found a tiny weeny gym round the corner from me, which only has a few people in it. I really like them. They were running a new thing for people 55 and over, which I'm like, oh yeah, that'll do me. And I have surprised myself because I love it. I'm on that machine. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like you're skiing. And I can't stop my face from smiling. It's just wonderful. So I'm really enjoying that. And, who would have thought it? Anyway.
Yes, I actually recently joined a book club, and I've always loved to read, and I read every day. And yet, I had never before in my life been part of an in-person book club. And in this particular club, the members as a whole vote on what our next book will be, and we each offer suggestions. But it has led me to read books that I never would have chosen on my own, and also to have the added dimension of being able to discuss the book with other people has just been so enriching. And it's also just a way for me to get out of the house and make friends, because
Yeah.
I think one thing that happens as we age is one new beginning that's hard is to make friends. And if we move, or if our spouse dies and we used to do everything with our spouse, or the relationship ends, whatever, um, to make new friends, and to have people to talk to, it can be very challenging.
Yeah, it can be, and therefore, so the important thing then, I think, is to keep your mind open to what might be possible. Like you're saying for the book club, I'm saying for the gym. It doesn't really matter what it is. Actually, it's just something that perhaps you haven't done before, or that, like me, you've been a bit sort of, poo-pooed it and put it down a bit. Well, actually, we might as well try things and see what they're like, because you
Right.
never know until you actually try, do you?
Absolutely. And so we've only got a few minutes left here. And so I want to end kind of where we began, circle back because a lot of people have joined since we started, and talk about the new beginnings you and I are each doing this year. So for myself, I am starting a member community for my paid subscribers, and we're having our first live Zoom gathering this Sunday. We'll be having monthly gatherings with a specific theme, and they'll just be informal conversations like this. No set agenda, no me doing this big presentation. It's all about community, because I think that's what our world needs most right now is people just genuinely listening to each other, seeking to understand rather than argue or persuade the other person they're wrong. So I'm really excited about that. If you're interested in it, go to my Substack page for more details. It's very inexpensive for the monthly subscription, or the annual one is even more of a bargain. Um, and then the other thing I'm going to do in probably either April or May is offer another spiritual support for weary souls group. And that is a 6-week group where it doesn't matter what your spiritual beliefs are. You can be an atheist, pagan, witch. We had all of the above in my last group. And it's just 12 of us that gather weekly on Zoom. And one week we talk about our spiritual experiences, one week spiritual places, one week spiritual people that are role models for us, living or dead, and so forth. Spiritual objects. We kind of do a show and tell one week, which is fun. Anyway, those are my new beginnings that I'm especially excited about for 2026. And how about you, Jane?
Well, I've got a couple of things. Next weekend, I'm part of the Whoa Wow gathering for online gathering for women, a wellness gathering. So, where will you find that? You'll find that on my Facebook page, actually, on my Facebook profile. And that's like a festival that people can drop in and out of. Uh, just like you're going to a festival, except you don't have to get out of bed or
Right.
get off the sofa. Lots and lots of different types of things there. And I'm speaking there about the 5 A's of conscious aging, and also about aging without children, which is another thing entirely. But I'm also starting in February a conscious aging circle, which is a monthly online Zoom call for a small group of people, actually women only. Sorry, blokes, if you're listening. But anyway, for women only. Where we will be having conversations about the kinds of things that are not usually talked about in terms of when we're aging. And that can be anything to do with the body, the mind, the soul, whatever it is. So, yeah, and that's all found in my Substack as well. So just look up janeduncanrogers.substack.com, I think it is.
Yes.
And it's all there.
And I will add anyone that would like more information about my stuff, especially since Sundays is coming up so soon, you're welcome to DM me on Substack. The only thing is be specific about what you're asking about and give a little information about yourself, because I get a lot of DMs that are just, hello, how are you? Or I think your posts are wonderful. And they're almost always complete spam. And so I'm not even willing to respond to them anymore. But if you write, a note that I saw your live and you talked about this spiritual support group or your membership that starts on Sunday and tell me more, then yes, I will respond.
Yes. Yes. And people can also get in touch with me just by email, jane@janeduncanrogers.com. That's very easy to remember. So,
Yes. And mine is similar. It's changingliveswg@gmail.com. So, uh, well, thank you so much, Jane. It's been a delightful conversation.
yeah. Yeah, no, I've really enjoyed it. You've absolutely inspired me, Wendy. I might have to do a few of these as well.
Wonderful. Yes. I started doing them last year, and Substack has just recently made it possible to do it on a laptop as opposed to having to do the phone, which I have not experimented with yet, figured out how to do it that way. So mine are still by phone. But anyway, yeah, they are easy to do. You don't have to be a tech wizard or anything to make it work. You just have to be brave enough to go on camera and talk to either alone or have a conversation with someone. And
Yeah.
I do want to say a quick thank you to everyone in the chat. There have been some wonderful comments. I'm just not capable of multitasking and responding to chat and keeping up with the conversation with my guest. So even though I haven't acknowledged what you said, I've read them when I can, and appreciate you being here. and listening to us and sharing your own insights. And the recording of this will be on my Substack and presumably on yours as well, Jane. I know you'll get a copy of it.
Yeah.
And so you're certainly welcome to comment on the recording as well. And it will also be on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel, and the audio will be a podcast on Apple and Spotify, because Substack makes it possible to auto upload to both of those platforms, which is great. So thanks again for being here. I hope to see you all again soon, and maybe some of you on Sunday in my membership community. So bye for now.
Bye.